I never retire because when I was nearly 50, I gave up being a chemist. And I never looked back. I never regretted it for 1 minute. So what I'm doing, really, pursuing and developing my hobby. I'm a hobby person, so I will never retire. I never intended to be a musician in the first place. I just wanted to be a chemist, and I got, I won't say dragged screaming into music, but I leaked into it by accident. I was brought to the guitar by my cousin. He was playing in a dance band, jazz, so it was the jazz guitar, the plectrum guitar, I first had. The person to whom I owe the greatest debt in my musical life was my teacher, Terry Asher, because although I had so few lessons with him, and they weren't steady because he doubled up as a first-class hypochondriac, always imagining he was going to die. Because he taught me very, very well. He taught me good technique. In parallel with that, he taught me music, not just chord symbols, everything. And to read music, I became a very good sight reader. He taught me to write music down and, critically, to improvise. Those are all extremely valuable things most teachers don't do. only ever had about 15, 18 months of sporadic lessons on a jazz guitar. They were the only structured lessons I ever had in anything in music. The rest was self-taught, as Americans would love to say, autodidact. The first time we'd ever heard Django Reinhardt would be round about 1936-7. Terry Usher's fiancée was in charge of a record shop on Market Street in Manchester. And we would go into the shop and we'd take a pile of records. We had no intention of buying anything, we didn't have the money to do it. But we could go in there and just listen to them. And one afternoon, we put on the first record of the Hot Club of France we'd ever heard. I remember the tune. It was called Chasing Shadows. And it was a wonderful sound, you know. But then suddenly, he launches himself into the middle eight with one of these mind-blowing chromatic runs, and everybody sort of jumped out of their skins. At that time, no theory was too ridiculous. You know, people just didn't do things like this. You couldn't play like this. There was something else there. Two people playing alternate notes. He played it slowly and it was speeded up for the recording. All these idiotic things. The last thing we never thought about it. The real truth, which I suppose we didn't face, was it was just pure talent. That was all. He was handicapped by talent. And then he came up to Manchester and played at the Ardwick Empire. After the concert, Terry and I and one or two others, including Charlie Scott, went backstage to see him. But a conversation wasn't really possible. He didn't talk much, and if he had done, it would have been in if you like, a gypsy accented French-Belgian, or Belgian-French. But at that time, Terry and I think had become the first two people on this planet to listen to recordings of Reinhardt and learn to play them. It was not easy, but we'd done it. So I picked up his guitar and played his solos on St. Louis Blues to him with all the cheek of an 18-year-old. And 17 or 18. He didn't say anything. I've often wondered what the astonished expression on his face meant. And that was the first time. I never actually talked to him. You could talk to Grappelli, but not to Reinhardt. He didn't talk. He'd only talk when he played. Eventually, I suppose this would be about 1937, that sort of time, I bought a little double bass and taught myself to play it. And then, I think the year was 37, maybe 38. I can always remember things, not always the year. I was asked to take my double bass to a jazz club, which was held over a shop in Manchester on Oxford Street, Reno's shop. And I was asked to take my bass. I didn't know what for at the time, but when I got up into the room, I found I was one member of a quartet. One was Adelaide Hall, a famous jazz singer who recorded with Duke Ellington. In fact, hers is the voice on the old Creole Love Call. And two brothers, Joseph and Django, which was quite a shock. So we played for 5 hours. I don't think anybody spoke at all. He just played, started something, and everybody else followed. So I did play with him for 5 hours. It was a very testing experience. Now, I first encountered Wes Montgomery in the same way I encountered Reinhardt, on records. And then he came to play at Ronnie Scott's jazz club. But he also played. He also played in the Riverside studio in the Jazz 425 series, which yes, and that was the first time I actually met him. After the program, I went and spoke to him, and he said, "Man, your climate, I've got flu in my thumb." He hated flying, of course. He was he was terrified of flying. He wouldn't have flown if Ronnie Scott had not gone over and held his hand. And I told him, I said, "Segovia is a lot older than you are. He has his backside in maybe 100 planes a year. He's still going." He said, "Man, he's living on borrowed time, so am I." Now, Wes was incredible. There are various videos of Wes, and you can see he had absolutely total control. He plays even on the recording and in concert. He played Thelonious Monk's Around Midnight in E-flat minor. He probably didn't know it was E-flat minor. He had no idea. He just played it. He had far beyond Reinhardt. He had this incredible sense of lyric melody and a drive and a wonderful knowledge of harmony. He was absolutely incredible. He's my all-time jazz guitar idol, Wes. But the funny thing is that he and Reinhardt had one thing in common, apart from not understanding music. Wes told me, he said, "I don't know what anything's called, but I know where it all is." When I started to write pieces, and improvisation is very important here, because the music is in your inner ear, and you translate it into sound on the instrument. But ideas can also be written on paper, and what you write can be influenced by what you hear. Back to Wes Montgomery. Absorbed through the ears, and that has an effect. So improvisation and composition are the same process. The only essential difference is improvisation is immediate, like conversation. It's never repeatable. And with composition, it's exactly the same thing, except that you have time to discard what is irrelevant or what could to improve the thing, to work on it. All my earliest pieces were portraits of girlfriends, and there's always been some idea. I need a stimulus. I'm not about to sit down and write a piece just because it comes into my head. It's usually stimulated by some sort of circumstance, some sort of image, whatever you like. I first encountered Segovia, of course, on the old 78 records, of which I still have a few, the old originals. But we'd never, they were just sounds, wonderful sound, but I never connected it with anything I might ever do in my life, musically. By then we had already formed a Manchester Guitar Circle, which was formed by Terry and I, and the meetings were held more or less alternately in one another's homes. And we got news, I think late in 1947, I think it was, that Segovia was coming to England and he would be playing in Bradford. This was a big deal. So we were driven over there. We actually hired a Rolls Royce. It was a pretty old one. And we went to Bradford, and this concert, this recital took place. So at last we'd seen him and heard him in the flesh. And it was a long, narrow room. He played at one end, and there was no exit at that end. So in order to get on and off stage, he had to walk the whole length of the room, in the aisle, as it were. So the last time he came off, we waylaid him and explained that we were members of Manchester Guitar Circle. And being a gentleman, he didn't say hard luck. And but he invited us to have a drink with him afterwards, so we all sat around the table. You know, by then I'd written a lot of little pieces, some of which were actually published. The earliest ones were for jazz guitar. I'd done my own sonata, a four-movement thing, again 19th century. It was supposed to be a tribute to Beethoven, because I was passing through my Beethoven period. It sounds more like a mixture of Saw and Giuliani, actually. And when we were talking to Segovia at the table, Terry produced a copy of this. I didn't even know he had it. Produced it from his coat or somewhere and showed it to Segovia. And Segovia looked at it very, very carefully, sort of peered at it the way he did because he was short-sighted, and handed it back. And he turned to Terry as though I was not there. He said, "It's very good," he said. "Keep him working. Keep me informed of what he does." And that was the first time I ever met him, and the first time he ever met me and took any interest in what I was doing. But I thought, well, he says that to all the girls, as it were. So when he came back in '49, I had written a few little things, including an experimental guitar version of a Gigue from Bach's Third Cello Suite, just as an experiment, see if I could do it. And he looked very interested in this. So interested that somewhere about 1953 or 4, and Segovia was one of those about 10 or 12 people who've recorded it. When he came back in 1949, he came to Manchester to do a solo recital in the Holdsworth Hall. We had already met him in 1948 because he was playing with the Halley Orchestra, and the man responsible for booking was a man called Bean, T.E. Bean, and Bean knew nothing about the guitar. So he invited Terry and I to have dinner with him and Segovia in the Constitutional Club in Manchester, and he played a solo recital. It was not very good. Actually, it was November the 4th, if I remember rightly. It was very cold. He was not very happy, but he was making mistakes, forgetting. And it was the first time we realised he was actually a human being. Human beings make mistakes, and he did. Anyhow, afterwards, he came to our home for dinner. It was the first time he ever came for dinner, together with his travelling companion, Olga Coelho, a marvellous Brazilian self-accompanied singer. And that was when we learned a lot of things in that meeting. Terry played a few things, and at one point Segovia took the guitar from him to demonstrate how it should be, and then he went on playing. So we realised that in a social situation, if you wanted Segovia to play to him and make a mistake. Well, then in 1951, Terry, who came to a meeting of public relations officers in London, and I came with him. And we visited Segovia in his hotel, and I took a little prelude, to show to him. So he said, would we mind, he had some things to do, would we mind coming back in a couple of hours? So we did. When we came back, he played it. I suspect that what he had to do was to learn to play it, because he was not a great sight reader. He played it, and he said, if you will write 2 more movements, if you will expand this to a longer piece and write 2 more movements, I will play the result. But I never did, because I found that the piece was complete in itself. There was nothing I could do to expand it. It would be artificial. So that was never done. But it was another lesson. You always learned lessons from him, the hard way mostly. For instance, if somebody says to me, will you write a piece for me? They'll probably never get it. If they say, I like a piece, I'm going to record it, I must have it by December, they will get it. But I will wait until mid-November at the latest, at the earliest, to start writing it. If somebody says, I would like a piece, and they say exactly what kind of piece they would like, then we'll get it quicker. I don't know how to write English music, because I don't know what the character of English music is. I'm too close to it. You know, it's like looking at yourself in the mirror and not recognising yourself. You don't what makes you. The Greek Suite was written in 1 week. It was written in Dunoon in Scotland when we were on holiday. That was written for Lisa and Evangelos in Athens. And they sent me a number of tunes, and I selected 5 and wrote this suite. And at that time there was a regular programme on radio, and classical guitar, I think, and Peter Sensei was the anchor man. And when he was interviewing them, they said it's impossible to believe that he had never been in Greece. In fact, it was a long time, 1984 before I went to Greece, another 16 years after that was written. My favourite piece, I think maybe the first song cycle I wrote for guitar and voice, 5 quiet songs, and those have been performed all over the world. I think in 1989 I heard them performed in many places, including my birthday concert in the Bolivar Hall in London. If we go back to late 1934, the year which I got my first guitar, which I still have, which has been played by many people, including Julian Bream and Edith Presley. Nobody knew, really, general public, if I knew of a guitarist, it was Segovia. That was it. The guitar was something you played purely as an amateur. Nobody ever thought of making a profession of it. The post-war years, 40s into the 50s mainly, was a great time for the arts of all kinds, because people had enough of war, people dropping bombs and shooting one another, and were looking for something more productive to do with their lives. At that time, of course, Segovia was emerging on LPs. And skiffle was around, skiffle music. The guitars were spreading like a rash all over the place. People playing them in bed sits and all over the surface of the earth. In fact, demand exceeded supply for some years. This gave a big market for the instrument. And this, together with Segovia's ambition to establish the guitar in tertiary musical establishments where it had never been seen before, its possibility of making some sort of a career now encouraged more people to take it seriously. And of course, inevitably, standards rose. They're still, in a sense, rising, technically. People are breaking all sorts of barriers for speed and fluency. Many people have now a level of technique which Segovia never had. The ability to make a left hand look like water flowing down, down a slope. It's not performing action in one place to another, it just flows, like pouring water down the fingerboard. There are many guitarists who have this now, who have a velocity and a facility that Segovia never ever had, even in his youth. It's bound to happen. Nothing stands still. The only trouble in many cases is a glorification of technique. Nobody ever tells them about music.
The nightingale that in the branches
I realised that playing the guitar was like playing any other instrument. It was bringing the best way of bringing two artefacts together. A human being is an artefact, and certainly a guitar is. They're all man-made. I tell people, for instance, in a class, I am potentially rather interested in what you play. I'm also interested, maybe more interested, in how you play it. And I found in the most unexpected places that that people, and with very good teachers, that people have forgotten the basics. I never hesitate to take anybody back to the ground if necessary. There was a very, very good guitarist in Venezuela called Ruben Riera, and Ruben was doing very, very well in Caracas. He had a nice apartment, he had a big American car, he could get concerts when he liked for hundreds of dollars, which was big money to them. One morning, figuratively speaking, he woke up and he thought, well, this is all very well, but where am I? What am I? I must find out. So he sold everything up and presented himself on my doorstep, unannounced. He'd come to get my opinion on his playing. So when he played, I said, well, Ruben, musically, what you're doing at the moment is rubbish. Technically, we have to go back to the drawing board. Square one. Instead of thinking, that silly old bugger, what's he doing? What's he know about it? Okay, thank you very much for your opinion, good morning. No, he did it, and he stuck with it. And he's one of the giants of the guitar in Venezuela now. But you never know how people will turn out. My best pieces are always written very quickly. I don't know why, but I suspect it's something to do with how the brain works. In fact, I often tell this to students. In memorising a piece, don't sit in front of it and worrying it until you wish the composer's parents had been sterile. Work on it for a certain length of time, 2-3 weeks at most, then put it away and forget it. Wherever you're up to, forget it. Leave it for the same length of time and come back to it. And you'll find you play it better and remember it better than you did when you put it away. Because it's like dripping water onto a sponge. If you pour water on the sponge, it doesn't necessarily saturate it, some of it runs off. If you drip it onto the sponge, and put a certain amount, let it soak in, you will saturate the sponge. I had an incredible experience then. I think it would be about 1955. I started writing a piece, and I came to one place, and it was like meeting a brick wall. And I couldn't go past that place. Nothing I did. I tried all sorts of methods to get past it, failed. Finally, abandoned the idea. This is junk, finished, unfinished. At that time, the house 1 mile from here, I wrote my music on a desk I'd made from Dexian and hardboard and stuff, on casters, so I could wheel it anywhere. Wheel it to the window for daylight, wheel it to the piano, wheel it anywhere into another room. And I was doing something, and on the shelf under the desk, I kept scrap manuscript paper for scribbling and making trials on. And one afternoon, I don't know what it was. I was doing something. I was typing something in the next room, and I went into the room, the music room, to check on something. I don't know what it was. No idea. It was nothing to do with pieces or writing. Maybe looking up a date. I never did it. It was as though somebody took me by the shoulder, sat me down at the desk, and I ferreted around amongst the scrap paper and pulled this piece out. And when I got up, I'd finished it. I had abandoned it, but my subconscious hadn't abandoned it. I now could not tell you where that point was. Segovia was it. You know, who was the greatest guitarist in the world? Segovia, of course. Who was the second greatest? I don't know. I don't know anyone else. So Segovia and what Segovia did were the guitar. But Segovia was a romantic Spaniard. He had a fixed range. He didn't like anything that couldn't have been written, what shall we say, after 1920. And everybody was playing the same thing, everybody peddling the Segovia repertory, to the point where a friend of mine and I invented the international interchangeable guitar program. Don't buy a program for the concert, buy a well-produced, stout, long-lived international program, take it to every concert. It would begin with pieces by either Devise in D minor or Zantz in D. It would progress to Dowland, progress to Saw, any one of 3 works. And it would go Albéniz, Granadas, any one of 3 works each or 2 works each. You can only put up with this for so long. Some years ago, Julian Bream played a concert in the Wigmore Hall on Sunday afternoon. The first half of programme Villa-Lobos, all 12 studies. Second half, first performance of Royal Winter Music. On the afternoon, Julian started with the Royal Winter Music. Afterwards I said to him, "You change the order of your programme. I suspect that you played it in that order because you knew if you played Villa-Lobos first, half your audience would go home." Well, he said that's exactly what I did. And this was so symptomatic. Julian once said to me, he said, "I think I and other people on my level have not done enough to acclimatise people to new repertory." I said, "I agree on the whole, but it couldn't be levelled at you. You've done more than anybody else to introduce new repertory." I have a number of principles in teaching. One is that teaching is a two-way process. The teacher who emerges from a lesson not having learnt something is not a teacher. It's a two-way process. It's not God handing out holy tablets. And the second is, what is important, why is more important. Don't tell people, "Do this," without saying why, explaining it. And I used to tell students, private students, I said, "If I ever tell you to do something, not why, remind me. I've just forgotten to do it." I suppose I think and work differently from most guitar teachers, because I've never ever been a performer, not on the classic guitar. Never ever done it. never wanted to do. I came into it too late. I didn't want to add one more bad guitarist to the world. In any case, I wasn't going to make a career. But I had a university training in science, and that taught me to be methodical, because that is the real object of any university course. To put things in order, to consider them, not to learn facts, but to know where to find them when you want them and what to do with them when you've got them. So I look at it analytically. I did a class in 1978. I did a week summer school in the Sibelius Academy in Helsinki. And they were all very good players. All of them are capable of tackling the nocturnal. And I said at the beginning, I said, OK, come up one by one, sit down, put your guitar on your knee, put your hands in playing position, prepare to play, but don't play, just sit there. And I criticised their sitting positions. I only found one that was OK. One man, I said, if you go on like that, you're going to have very bad backache. He said, I'm not, I've already got it. I first wrote actually before the war, in BMG, and a little publication that Len Williams, he put out a little magazine called Modern Guitarist. Then when it wasn't selling enough copies, it was broadened out to be Fretted Harmony, taking in refugee banjoists and mandolinists. I wrote a little for that. I also wrote a little for BMG, which of course was one of the longest running music magazines of all time, ran over 70 years. That is not as long as Gramophone, that's been going a long time now. But gradually I got more and more involved in writing for BMG. In fact, at one point I was writing 3 columns parallel. One was my 100-odd instalment harmony for guitarists, melody and harmony for guitarists. Another was the electric plectrum guitar. And the third one, writing under the name of Discus, reviewing records. This was the magazine owner idea, not mine. And the magazine owner was A.P. Sharp, who owned the Clifford Essex Company, who published the magazine. He wanted this because he said, yeah, if you wrote under your own name, you would get pestered by people, maybe people who didn't like what you wrote. So it was Discus. And when my own music was reviewed, I got somebody else to review that, but it was always Discus. And then I think it was about 1968, I think. I had a call from a magazine called Records and Recording. They had been looking for somebody to review guitar and lute records. So I started with Records and Recording. And at first, with guitar, mandolin, harp, lute. And then the editor at one point said, we need somebody to review the harpsichord music. Said, the harpsichord is plucked strings. How do you fancy doing it? So I said, well, I love the harpsichord. I already know a lot about it. OK, I'll take it on. So I did. From harpsichord music, it branched out, of course, into baroque music in general, and through the lute into early music in general, through the guitar into Spanish music in general. And then in 1978, I was tipped off by the editor of Records and Recording, who said, Gramophone have asked me if I will release you to review for them. And she said, I would advise you to take it. It's a big step up. It opens up all sorts of other things. So I did, and I've transferred, and I've been reviewing for Gramophone, with whom the same sort of thing has happened. Ever since I've been with Gramophone, I've been a member of the baroque music panels and instrumental. And for a couple of years, period performance. I've written for many, many magazines, and of course many overseas. The Bristol Spanish Guitar Centre decided in 1974 that they would like to have a proper summer school. So they found this Cannington College, which is about 70 odd miles further down the peninsula from Bristol. And they asked me if I would direct it. Then, at the end of 1975, I got this letter from Gordon Saunders, a Spanish guitarist in Bristol. He said, we're giving up the summer school. It's too much work at a time when we really want a break. By coincidence, a couple of days later, I was in the offices of Universal Edition, talking to their publications manager, Bill Colleran, and he, out of the blue, he said, would it be a good idea? Do you think we could get a summer school going for the guitar? So I said, yes, I think it's very possible. I said, I think we can take over one as a going concern. They turned over all their accounts and mailing lists and everything, and we took it over. So Dorothy worked as a house mother on the course. I directed it, and the thing never fell below 69 students. That was the lowest attendance. We hit that 3 times. The maximum was 107. We must have been doing something right with the formula we had, our staffing policy, because it just grew and grew, and it became world famous. We had students from, I don't know, well over 30 countries outside the UK. I think the record was held jointly by Norway and Germany, with 7 students in 1 year from those countries. Famous artists used to come. They didn't require paying. If you told them there's not much money, it doesn't matter. It was a great showcase. It was a wonderful thing to be doing. I think no summer school works on those principles now. We used to get people come year after year, and it was just like a family. People used to register. They'd say, we just went to sleep for 51 weeks. This is the only reality. It ran until 1973, and then, having had 18 years of the administration, Dorothy got tired, so that was the last Cannington. It was never announced as such. It became very, very famous indeed, and there are people who think it's still running. I just hope to go on doing the same thing, maybe without going downhill, doing the same things, meeting new people, going to new countries, new things, and no ambition beyond that. I might have one time have had the ambition of being able to play a decent game of golf, but I've never had the time to do it. My handicap in golf is still that of basically being too close to the ball after striking it. So no, I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing, and I just want to stay alive and travel as long as as long as I'm not required by the Almighty to hand in my dinner pail, and as long as I'm mobile enough to do it. Next year, I've 6 things lined up, the most remote of which is Poland in October next year. I don't even know if I'll be on the planet. I just hope that saying that I'm going that far ahead is not the hubris that invites nemesis. if that works, I'm quite happy.